you kind of touched on it when you're introducing, but Redbreast is, it's a synonymous, like it's what a lot of people think of when they think of Irish whiskey. Obviously Jameson is one of the first ones that come to mind, but Redbreast is just a brand that is, it seems to be definitely one of the most loved Irish whiskies. It's certainly one of the most recommended ones. And it's one that, I'm always keen to recommend. Like we've a big portfolio of Irish whiskies, and we have a lot of different strengths. But like for me, even the likes of there's a 12-year-old, which we're about to taste. This is one that if somebody said to me, like, I've never tasted Irish whiskey, I like Scottish whiskey or I like American whiskey, where should I start? I would always say, if you're already a whiskey drinker, Redbreast 12 is a great place to start, because I just think there's so much to like about this whiskey. It reflects to me, what single pot still whiskey can taste like, and I think it's usually appealing, for people that are used to the likes of the single malts. It has the character and has the mouthfeel to appeal to those kind of whiskey drinkers as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, like we obviously talked, I mean, anybody who's probably bought into this realizes that the Redbreast range is single pot still Irish whiskey. So, on the off chance that there's somebody in here tonight hasn't a clue what that is, perhaps you could describe that for them, Joe.
Yeah, so single pot still Irish whiskey is, in my opinion, it's like the quintessential style. Certainly for us at Midleton, it's a style of whiskey that's only produced in Ireland. So this is our kind of unique style of whiskey that we make here in Ireland. The main difference between this and any other type of whiskey is we actually combine both malted and unmalted barley together in our mash bill.
Yeah.
So whereas, if you're in Scotland, you have a single malt that's going to be made of 100% malted barley. When we're making our single pot still mixed whiskey, we actually combine malted and fresh barley or green barley together in the mash bill. And that's what makes it so unique. And the reason that we do that really is part of it is tradition, is keeping this style of whiskey alive that we used to make and ship all over the world. And more importantly, the reason is because we really like the flavor. When you mix malted and non-malted barley together, you do get a slightly different character to the whiskey. Most people would say, like, there's a creamy character to it, particularly in the likes of the Redbreast. I would agree. You tend to get a little bit of a creamier mouthfeel, a little bit of a rich mouthfeel, and also a little bit of spice as well. So you'll find what we would call like the pot still spice. You'll find a little bit of that in all of these whiskies. If you want to really feel the spice, like I always think Powers is it's the one that, like, something like a John's Lane. If you really like that heavy peppery note, Redbreast would be more that kind of creamy, Christmassy character. But single pot still whiskey is it's making a comeback. I'd say it used to be a massive spirit that you could buy all over the world. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you're very aware, Phil, Irish whiskey has had some pretty rough times, and this style of whiskey, it came close to potentially disappearing altogether. But over the last 15 years, has been going from strength to strength and really making a revival. So we're starting to see more demand for it, more brands, and more distilleries that are actually producing it and resurrecting this style.
Yeah, because I mean, the 12-year-old actually wasn't reborn really until 1991. Sure, it wasn't. So there was a bit of a fallow period there where Gilbey's had sort of lost actual new make spirit from Jameson and or Midleton, and weren't being supplied anymore. And then it kind of dropped off the shelves. But thankfully, IDL sort of like a phoenix from the flames, I suppose, brought the thing back again, back in 1991. So I suppose in some ways, like, it's a modern success story, isn't it, for Irish whiskey, this one?
Yeah, and I mean, I think when Gilbey's, when we phased out bonding, so we stopped bonding whiskey, we actually agreed to continue supplying the pot still to Gilbey's for a number of years. And I think that was just a testament to how popular and how important this Irish whiskey was. And then, as I say, it disappeared for a few years. There was a bit of negotiating, and then Irish distillers actually purchased the rights to the brand. So rather than it being a bonded whiskey that we just supplied liquid for, it actually became part of the portfolio. And then there was a few years spent essentially tweaking the wood management system. So I know you would have tasted, some Redbreast from the 70s and 80s, and like, while there are some great bottlings, there are some less great, and that was, that was the nature of wood management at the time. So IDL basically got a whole new wood management system to create a more consistent product. And since 1991, that's really when Redbreast's kind of recent revival and journey has begun.
Yeah, and so kind of what would be the maturation makeup of the 12-year-old then?
So it's a single pot still. So it's one style of whiskey. There's a couple of different distillates in there. Maturation wise, we use American ex bourbon and Spanish Oloroso sherry casks. Now, the one thing that a lot of people celebrate and really like about this whiskey is the higher portion of sherry casks that we use. So we do use more sherry casks to mature this whiskey than the likes of our Jameson or our Spots or even our likes of our Pars. So
yeah,
that's why Redbreast has really developed the reputation, as some people call it, the Christmas cake of Irish whiskey. And I think if anyone watching has a little nose of it, you can probably understand why. One thing I will say is, when I talk about how heavily sherry it is, I don't want to overlook the bourbon barrels, because they play an equally important role, and it's actually about the balance. But I think the first thing that's immediately obvious is that dried fruit, Christmas cake, and cooking spice character you get on the nose.
Definitely. I think also actually about what you said there about the bourbon side of it, because there's a whole ton of vanilla and fudge.
Yeah, and that just softens it. I mean, I love sherry cask whiskey, but I remember the first time I tried an all sherry cask whiskey, and it was very intense, really high in tannin, very complex and very lovely. But it wouldn't be something that I would say I could just sip, over and again and again. It's very intense. So you do need I think that the bourbon barrels, they just bring that, your typical vanilla, your fudgy character, and just a little bit more balance.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's a really nice hazelnut kind of note going through that nose as well. I suppose that would kind of be like your the sherry cask probably imparting that more.
I always get I can see what you mean about hazelnut. For me, I get sometimes almond or
marzipan, nearly.
Marzipan, yeah. Particularly in the Redbreast, and there's one of the Pars whiskies I get as well, but I would get it definitely in this one.
So I don't know if any of the guys who are watching, if you want to put in the chat what you're getting, or if you have any questions about the 12-year-old, you can fire them in the Q&A section.
I haven't had a sip yet, so I'm just going to...
Yeah, I think I'll have a sip myself. We've talked enough.
So if anyone sitting at home hasn't had Redbreast or hasn't had a single pot still, you'll probably notice that creaminess is one of the first things. It's personally one of the first things I notice, is this lovely silky creamy mouthfeel. It does stick to your palate a little bit more, and it can depend on the whiskey as well. We were having a discussion earlier about how different pot stills, some people would have described the old Green Spot as oily. The likes of the John's Lane or the older Pars whiskies, especially the stuff from John's Lane, people would say maybe a little bit waxy in texture. Whereas I personally I think Redbreast falls into the creamy category.
Yeah, I mean, it has a nice mouth coating kind of. I mean, it is oily, but more in a, rather than like an engine oil type of thing. It's more just like a mouth coating, viscous kind of creaminess, as you say.
It's almost, we talked about this as well. I find some of our whiskies are like buttery, buttery and creamy and soft. This would definitely be, in my opinion, in that kind of flavor camp. But
I definitely think though you do get that kind of spice coming through as well. There's a little bit of maybe like ginger, stem ginger comes through on the palate as well. I see there that Michael and Aaron there, they said the 12-year-old was a game changer for me. There's a nice milk chocolate and toasted marshmallow flavor along with fruitcake. So yeah, you definitely get those Christmas cake, fruitcake notes going on. I think the one thing that gets me about this is to me, the 12-year-old is probably one of the pound for pound or dollar for dollar or whatever best whiskies that you can buy. I generally wouldn't be a massive fan of whiskies at 40%. I like a wee bit higher ABV, but this just gives so much for where it's at. And the price point is so good as well.
I think there's so much available right now that people are becoming a bit more, price conscious and are a bit more careful about what they spend on, because I mean, it's easy to get stung and spend £40 or £45 on a bottle of whiskey and then not be blown away by it.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm not going to stand here and just toot our own horn and talk about how great we are, but I do, a lot of people say to me that particularly people who work in the trade, that they use this as a bit of a benchmark, for other whiskies that might be in a similar price. And I can understand why, I just think it delivers a lot for where it sits, and I think, it's not inaccessible. Like 40 to 45 quid can be a lot of money depending on what your budget is for whiskey, but it's certainly a whiskey that you can get in the bar, a measure for well under a tenner,
Yes,
which absolutely. Which is I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and the thing about it is you won't feel shortchanged with it either. And I think if you're coming to Irish whiskey, especially from maybe like single malts or bourbons, like there is something fairly unique about Redbreast 12 that kind of just will hook you in. It's always kind of anybody that comes to visit from America or anything like that, if they've never tried a single pot still, it's always the first drink I say, well, this is what you have to try.
It is funny though, like there's something about the Redbreast brand that seems to inspire like a sort of loyalty. Not maybe that loyalty isn't the right word, but people do fall for the brand and they do fall for the whiskey. I would like to say it's got to be the flavor. It has to be. They just like the way it tastes. At the end of the day, that's I guess the most important thing. But it's one that
Well, I think like the thing about it is that like Billy and Dave and Brian Nation before them with the distillation and all the rest of it. I mean, they have done such an amazing job to keep the 12-year-old so consistent.
Yeah.
And I think that is the big bonus point for it, is that you kind of go, what you're going to get. You just know that you're spending 40, 45 quid and you're going to get quality. And that's basically all there is to it. So, like, I mean, for me personally, like, Redbreast 12 is one of those whiskies that never really leaves my house. It's like always on the shelf,
It's funny. It's like it's not the coolest or most exciting thing to talk about, but people like consistency really is so integral to building a brand and building a product. Because if you have an expectation of what your Redbreast 12 is supposed to taste like and it doesn't meet that expectation, that's it's over.
Yeah, that's it. And I suppose actually the thing is with Redbreast, I know we're not tasting it tonight, but I mean, you have like the 12-year-old cask strength, which comes out in batches every year. And for the real nerds, not only is it cask strength, but it gives you batch variation. So I mean, you'll know yourself that yes, we love consistency as well because you know what you're going to get. Sometimes you love a little bit of batch variation as well because you know from yourself and Facebook and other like Twitter and all the rest of it. Like people will go mental about actually the batch 116 of Redbreast 12 cask strength was like superb, and they'll start rating ones against each other and all. So but I take your point. I mean, whenever you go into a supermarket or your local off license, you just know that this is a consistently great product, and it's great to have that.
But I do agree, and I think the decision to release Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength and keep it going, it was so smart, because there are, like, for the average person just buying a bottle of Redbreast, consistency is so important. But for for want of a better word, the whiskey nerds, as you say, like we want to, this one tastes slightly different, and that's the kind of uniqueness of whiskey, not just Redbreast or not just Irish whiskey, but there is going to be batch variation, and in some cases it is something to be celebrated, and you will get people who are extremely dedicated to finding very specific batches, which fair play to them.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know that batch 114 is very sought after, isn't it? Just because it's quite hard to get. But I kind of think that like batch 116 and batch 119 are kind of like the two that people really seem to have held on to as being like the cream of the crop of the cask strength so far.
I only had the 19, and I have to say, like, I was pretty blown away by it. It would, unfortunately, it's one of those ones that I tried and I'm like, wow, that's really good. And then you discover that it is the one that everybody else wants. So I kind of gave up hope of actually getting any.
Well, thankfully, I still have about half a bottle of batch 116 and half a bottle of batch 119, but I'm kind of letting them go gradually because I don't have any like second bottles or anything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of